Good afternoon. My name is Turner Bitten. I'm the Executive Director here at Westview Media. Thank you for joining us for this live stream of our latest Candid Candidates event. We're very pleased to welcome Wayne Cushing, our incumbent county treasurer. Thank you for joining us, Wayne.
You bet, Turner. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, we appreciate you joining us tonight. As you and I have been talking back and forth behind before we got started. For those of you who are in the audience, you can submit questions live on Facebook for us, and I'll be sure to ask them. But as we get started, Wayne, why don't you just tell us about yourself, your background, and that kind of thing?
Sure. So I am a lifelong resident of Salt Lake City, Utah, actually a graduate of Highland High School. Also went to the University of Utah and got a master's of accounting degree there. After that, I became a CPA with a national firm, and my specialty with that firm was auditing. Now that might sound too exciting, but some of the big companies that we audited, it would include cities, for example, Salt Lake City, Bountiful City, Murray City. So I was heavily involved in the government side, on the auditing side. But after 8 years of being in the public accounting firm, I decided to go out into the private world. Spent a lot of years as a controller, as a CFO, chief financial officer. And then the last 10 years before I looked at into politics was with a big company out of Clearfield, and their specialty was HVACs for big contracts like sports arena. We did the LDS conference center, things like that. And so my background has been financial from day one, college, CPA, and then in the private world as a controller or a CFO.
Thank you. So in your view, I asked these questions kind of in a reverse order than you might expect, but I found it helps move the conversation forward in a good way. In your view, what is the most important role that the treasurer's office plays? Okay,
so by statute, our biggest responsibility is to collect property tax. In Salt Lake County, for example, we this year will be asked to collect $1.6 billion in property tax. And those dollars go to, the majority of those dollars, over 50%, go to school districts. And then they also go to cities, they go to the county, they go to special districts, even down to the mosquito abatement. Some of the monies will go there. So that is our number one responsibility, to collect the tax, invest it for a short time, and then distribute it to over 70 entities are relying on us to collect and get that distribution to them on a timely basis. That's our number one responsibility. There's many, many more though.
Yeah. So given that, what got you interested in running for the position in the first place? This is, from my understanding, would be your third term?
Yeah, that's correct. I ran in 2010. I was actually approached by some people from the county, actually the county auditor's office, indicating that Larry Richardson, who had been the county treasurer for 16 years, was retiring. Larry had a CPA, was a CPA, also had a massive financial background, and they wanted to make sure that that trend continued. So they asked me to run. I actually signed up on the very last day because I had never done anything political like that. Obviously, that's a big step for somebody to take. But after consideration, I decided, I mean, of all the elected officials, that's the one that I would be most qualified for, and the fit would be there. And so I said, sure, I'll do it. And we were fortunate enough to win at convention because of my background, and then obviously win the election in 2010 and then again in 2014.
Thank you. So in your opinion, why does having a separate county treasurer matter?
Oh, good question. Good question. Yeah, many people will ask, First of all, the county treasurer is a lot different than any city treasurer. The county treasurer is collecting monies for multiple entities, not just the county. In fact, less than 15% of the monies I collect actually stay within the county budget. So we're responsible for collecting for a lot of entities throughout the county. So number one, you need to have independence there. The second reason, and the most important reason, is that as an independent elected official, you're not representing the county, you're not representing or focusing on what the mayor wants or the council wants. You're trying to do what's best for the taxpayer and the property owner. The reason why many of the elected officials were set up as independent was to protect the property owner, and that includes the treasurer. And I can give some instances later on of things that we have done solely for the benefit of the property owner.
Thank you. That is a question I have later on. I want to dive a little bit deeper. So you talked about your relationship with the county mayor and council, and you don't work for them, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So what is your relationship like with the county mayor and council? Not necessarily individual people, but the offices.
Okay. So there's a couple of reasons why the county treasurer is independent. And one of them is as a watchdog for some of the things that the mayor and the council will do. For example, about 6 years ago, the mayor's office took over the budget process. And so the concern was that the mayor would be able to set a budget based on unrealistic revenue projections or whatever. So what they did is they put a number of the elected officials on a revenue committee that would kind of monitor those projections to make sure they were reasonable. I'm also part of what is called the debt review committee. In fact, I chair that every 3 years, and we're responsible for vetting any and all debt that is provided by the county, such as bonds, et cetera, like that. So you want to have somebody who's independent that will give the council an independent view, and also the mayor's finance team an independent view, so that you don't have somebody controlling all of the answers, so to speak, and all of the areas. So that's one of the main reasons.
Thank you. So during the budget process, you're there to provide insight on revenue projections.
That is correct. And this happens throughout the year. In fact, so the budget is finalized right before the November election, but beginning now, we'll start having meetings mainly and the big areas that they look at are the sales tax projections. As you know, the major revenues that the county depends on, number one is property tax. And property tax is what they would call a steady, reliable source of revenue, because if I do my job, they know how much I'm going to collect and they can count on that. But the one area that is an unknown and can change or be variable is sales tax, because a lot of that's based on the economy. In 2008, they saw a dramatic decrease in sales tax, which caused budget issues. And with COVID this year, that is one of the biggest concerns with the budget, is how will it affect sales tax projections this year and also for 2021.
Thank you. So after the budget is approved and that process is concluded, can you share what your relationship is like with the county assessor's office? We had a candidate for the assessor, and I think talking through that process would be helpful for listeners.
Sure. So basically how the property tax certified rate is calculated is like you mentioned first. The budget is calculated and finalized by each entity's governing board. For example, Salt Lake County would be the mayor would propose a budget and the council would approve that budget. Same with the school district, same with the cities, same with whatever entity is asking us to collect a property tax. They come up with a budget, And those budgets have the citizens in that area have an opportunity to go to the budget hearings and talk about issues that they might have with the budget, especially if there's a tax increase. They are required to allow the citizens to come and talk about that tax increase. So like you mentioned, first of all, you have the budget, and then second of all, the assessor's office will do the valuation. And the valuation is used to determine what each property's share of property tax will be based on that valuation. So basically what they do is they take everybody's valuation, they total it up, and they have a total valuation for the entire county, and then they divide that by the revenues that need to be collected, and you come up with a property tax rate. And so but the treasurer has one important part of that tax rate, and I think I'll go over that a little later, because that's something that we actually can determine how much taxes are billed.
Okay. And I'll give you just a break for just a second. I'm going to look for questions. We do have a question, but before I get into that, I'd like to just remind those that are watching live to submit your questions here in the chat on Facebook. I keep looking back and forth between my two screens as I look for your questions. But Dee Dee asked if you as the county treasurer ever work with the legislature.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. The legislature will do bills, and obviously the reason why a legislature will present a bill is because they have either a concern from a constituent or they see something that they're concerned about. And so periodically, annually, there'll be bills that affect the county treasurer's office. I can think of one early on in when I became county treasurer, so this would have been 2011 or 12, where a legislature wanted to put a lien on delinquent properties and sell that lien to people throughout the country, and that way we would collect monies earlier. But what we were able to do is myself and a couple other county treasurers met with this legislature and just kind of showed them that you might get a little bump that first year, but overall it wouldn't be a significant increase based on the way the state statute already was, that we are able to get those delinquent taxes collected. And what we were able to do was, once we showed that to him, he understood how the state of Utah already has a good system in collecting delinquent property taxes. And we were able to convince him not to go with the bill. And we'll also use the legislature for things that we need to have done. For example, currently, 6 years ago, we approached the legislature and said, currently we're required to send a property tax notice to every address by mail. 6 years ago, we approached them and said, what if we also had as an alternative for those who choose to do so to get their property tax notice by email? That does a couple of things. Number one, reduces the cost on our end as far as mailing and printing. Number two, there's a number of individuals who would rather receive things by email instead of by mail. Number one, it gets to them sooner. Number two, a lot of people don't want to deal with mail anymore. So the times are changing. So that's another thing that we're able to do. And currently, as we'll probably go over in a little bit, the Salt Lake County Treasurer's Office is responsible for tax relief. Yeah. So last year, the Revenue Committee of the legislature came up with a bill regarding tax relief on how to get more people to qualify for it. And so I was on a committee with Senator Davis, was assigned to run that bill. And so I was on a committee with Senator Davis to look at the ways that we could make that more beneficial for more people. It didn't pass the way we wanted it to. So actually next week I'm meeting with him again on a committee, and we're gonna try to get a bill through that will help those who deserve tax relief.
Thank you. And I'll get into tax relief in just a little bit. We can expand on that. One of the things we did get another question, and Phil, I'll get to your question in just a second. But I wanted to ask you before we get too far away. I noticed that you highlight CPA on your sign. Is having a CPA and being a county treasurer a requirement, or is that what are the traditional qualifications for a treasurer?
Okay, actually, that is a great question. Number one, it is not a requirement for all county treasurers. And the reason for that, and the reason I haven't pushed to have it be a requirement, is that each county has a different level of property tax amounts that are needed to collect. I mean, some are very small counties. It wouldn't be fair for every county to require a CPA. But what we've seen is a big difference. When Larry Richardson was elected in 1994, for example, he was the first CPA or anybody with a significant financial background in the county treasurer's office as an elected official. And what he found was that, for example, when he came on board, he was basically said, hey, don't worry about doing anything. You can go back to your office. We got this covered. And his immediately reaction was, wait a second, I'm an elected official. The citizens of Salt Lake County expect me to pull my weight, and I can do so with my financial background. And he was actually able to reduce some of the accounting staff after retirement, based on the fact that he could do many of the things that other people were doing for him. So the question would be, if you don't have somebody with a financial background, CPA obviously is something that I'm very proud of. Took a lot of schooling and a major test, and requires 40 hours of continuing education in areas that I get to pick on where I want to focus. So you basically have to make the choice of, if you don't have that financial experience, you're gonna have to hire somebody who does, because there's some significant, and we'll go over some of the things that we've done based on basically math and financial calculations that have saved the county money and also saved the taxpayers money. So it's not required. I haven't pushed for it to be required based on the size of the counties throughout the state. But I obviously would think it's been a benefit since Larry's came on board in 1994, and hopefully people will feel that I've continued that tradition.
Thank you. I'm going to move on really quick to Phil's question. He asked, has COVID affected your office? And if so, how has it affected the treasurer's office?
Okay, so we've had a couple of areas where it's affected us quite a bit, but we think we planned around it. So obviously in March, when COVID hit, it didn't take long for the county to realize that we needed to shut down the county offices to prevent this and the spread and slow the spread. And we obviously were all on board with that. The biggest issue we had was on September 1, we had what was our tax relief deadline, especially dealing with circuit breaker, which is tax relief for the elderly. And if you think about it, that was really our most, that was the population that we were most afraid of coming out in the public, coming to our office. So what we did was we did it by appointment only, so that those who were coming in would have a set time. We would meet, our doors are closed, but we would meet them in the hall, obviously do proper cleaning before they got in. And then we would be ready for them. So the biggest concern we had at the time was, how are we going to get everybody who wants tax relief or deserves tax relief to get in before the September 1 deadline? So we did a number of things. Number one, we sent out some reminder notices saying, if you need to come into our office, schedule early, which people did. And the other way that we were able to reduce the number of people that had to come into our office was have their applications done by email. And we had a big number of those that did it that way. So now we were able to accommodate those who did not want to go out in public by doing it by email. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have that same issue on November 30, which is the deadline for property tax. So one of the things that we do is we get our notices out sooner than any other county. We'll have a reminder notice included in that property tax notice, asking people to, number one, if they do need to come into our office, come in early. We're also going to provide a number of ways for them to pay their property taxes, which includes online, e-check, the lockbox, you name it, that they won't have to come into our office. So we're worried about it, but we're preparing for it. We had success with the tax relief program on the changes we made. So yes, it is an issue. We've also done a lot of changes with our office staff itself. We have multiple people working from home, and we have the computer set up that they can do so. Our accounting staff rotates. We'll have one come in a day, and same with others throughout the office. So COVID has been a challenge. Fortunately for us, we were able to have some time to plan for it, and I think the steps that we've made have been successful.
Thank you. So we've talked, or you've mentioned tax relief quite a bit. Why don't we transition and talk about the different forms of tax relief?
Sure.
And do you set those forms of relief, or is that a statewide standard?
Okay. Number one, it is a statewide standard. The number one, well, there's two major tax relief programs. Number one is for the veterans. And then when I say veterans, this is for any veteran that received any disability based on while they were in service. And that is probably our largest amount of tax relief that is given is that group. We're very successful in that. And number one is because the veterans will spread the word amongst themselves, saying, you know, hey, if you have any disability, which is, in order to get that disability, you have to have from the Veterans Administration, they actually have to have a letter that will designate what percent disabled you are based on your service. So we feel pretty good about getting that word out. The other area is called the Circuit Breaker Program. And the word circuit breaker comes from trying to prevent taxes from being such a major part of an elderly person's income that they can't deal with other things that they need. For example, food and prescriptions and whatever. So the circuit breaker program is based on the state, and that actually is the bill that we're working on to try to get more people that can qualify for it. There's two parts of the circuit breaker program. One of it comes from the state, and it's based on your annual income. And so the limit is kind of like $34,200 for 2020. If you make less than that, you can get a refund from the state on a reduction of property tax from the state, and then the state will reimburse us as the county. And the other portion is the county also has a portion of that circuit breaker. So if you're a homeowner, you pay property tax on 55% of your value. If you qualify for circuit breaker, you get another 20% taken off. So you're actually only paying on 35% of your value. So there's a significant amount of relief that can go to those who qualify. And obviously that's the area that we try to promote and have promoted significantly throughout the time that we've been here. Because in reality, there's what we call a statutory minimum, things that we're required to do by statute. And publicizing tax relief is not one of the things that we're required to do, but we think it's important that we do that. Since we came on board, we now go to all the senior centers that we can. We go to the senior expos. We do advertising. Anytime anybody from the news will come in to ask us about anything in the treasurer's office, we ask them also, will you do something on the tax relief program. And we think we've had success doing that. Obviously this year with COVID, that was one of our concerns, is we couldn't go to the senior centers like we did. They didn't have senior expos anymore. So we put out press releases, and we, like I said, we put out the postcards. But there are a couple other minor, I won't say minor, but not as many people qualify or use them. There's tax relief for the blind. There's tax relief for the indigent and the disabled, or a hardship. So there's many areas. So what we tell people, if they have any question whatsoever on whether they qualify for tax relief, is to come meet with our people, and we'll see if they are qualified, and if they're close, and which means they might be qualifying next year, we make sure we send them an application so that they'll have it in front of them.
Thank you. Kind of building on this question of tax relief, do you offer different payment plans? I know a lot of folks through their mortgage, myself included, my property taxes are just paid through my mortgage. But for folks that maybe don't do that or have paid their home off, is there a payment plan option on top of tax relief, or how does that kind of work?
Yeah, so we do have a payment plan, and you have a number of options. We call it the 9 payment plan or the 10 payment plan. And you can either do that, we'll send you a coupon and you write a check and send it in every month, or we can actually have it taken out of your account monthly. The 10 payment plan basically says you make your 9 payments, which is an estimate because we're doing it based on prior year's tax, and then your 10th payment will automatically be deducted from your account based on what's left owing. A lot of people like that because then they don't have to worry about doing that final check, but others like to actually write that final check to see how much it is. Now, we do have a deferral program, the county does, and this is for people who are under significant financial constraints and their property taxes are delinquent, so much so that they might be getting close to having it go to tax sale. Obviously, in the county, we don't want to kick anybody out of their house because they can't afford to pay the property tax. And so they do have what is called a deferral program where the person will make monthly payments. They have to qualify for that based on financial need, financial struggles, et cetera. So it is something that is available for them. So there's pretty much a program for anybody that has any kind of issues paying their tax. Just to kind of give you an idea of how the Utah statute works on delinquent property tax. If you don't pay your property tax by November 30, there's a 1% penalty. So it's not a significant penalty. And then that gives you till January 31 to pay your property tax without any additional cost whatsoever. If you don't pay by January 31, that penalty goes up to 2.5% from 1. And then you also are charged an interest rate that is currently will be at 7%. So,
thank you. So to kind of turn this more toward the campaign, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your role in your office. You are running for re-election, and what do you see as the biggest issues, or what is your kind of message to voters as to why you're running for re-election?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think, like I mentioned before, when Larry was elected, we found the benefit of being a CPA or having a significant financial background. I think I've continued that. But one thing that we brought that maybe also brought in is that we actually came from the private sector. And so we were able to look at ways to help our customer, and really our customer is the taxpayer. And so one of the things that we noticed right offhand, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is one way for the property tax bill to go down is for me to do my job and collect the most we can every year. So in other words, what they have is what is called a collection rate percentage. And when we came in here in 2010, it was 94, a little over 94, almost 95%. But what we found out is that for every percent that you collect over and above that, and so our goal is 98%. If we can collect 98%, there's a significantly less amount that needs to be billed For example, we've kind of kept track over the 10 years that we've been doing this. We figured there's over $160 million of property taxes less billed because we're doing our job and having a higher collection rate. So that's one area that we've done. And so what we're saying, and the reason, and it was actually some easy initial ways of doing that. And for example, when the auditor sends out his valuation notice, which we've all received, it goes out at the end of July, he would get a batch full of bad addresses. And in the past, they would just hold them on because they didn't have the financial means to try to discern where the right addresses should go. But what we did is we approached them and said, if you'll give us your bad addresses, we'll do the research and correct those addresses so that when we send out our notice in October, we no longer have to deal with those bad addresses. And so they were willing to do that, and that's made a significant part. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we also send our notice early in October. By state statute, it's required to go out by the end of October, but we do it early in October. Number one, so we can look for any additional bad addresses that come out, and also gives the people a time to deal with any issues that they might have. So those are some of the things that we've done. It's based on how it's going to help the taxpayer. Like I mentioned, we did the e-billing. We're also looking at ways to cut cost and the other ways that we can do so. Because I came from the private sector, we looked at staffing so that when somebody would retire, we would say, okay, do we need to continue with a full-time person? Or can we have temps come in during the busy time? We actually reduced our full-time employees by a couple by doing things like that. So I think when somebody says, why should I vote for you again? I say, well, let's look at what I've done in the past, what we've done in the past. We've been successful. We've saved the taxpayers, like I mentioned, millions and millions of dollars. We've done some things in the investing side and with tax relief that have helped the county. So, like I say, there's a lot of things that the treasurer does. We're on committees throughout the county. I've been asked by the governor and the state treasurer to be on committees with the state. I'm actually the vice chair of the Money Management Council currently, which is the committee or council that reviews all the investments that all the entities make to make sure that they're proper and safe. And so it's been a fun ride. I think we've done a lot of things, and I'm looking forward to doing more in the next 4 years.
Well, thank you. And we are winding down on the questions that I have prepared, so I'd like to just prompt those who are watching live that if you have additional questions, please submit them so that I can get them asked. You've kind of already hit on this a bit, but I want to just ask one more time, are there any additional initiatives that you've worked on that you'd like to talk about? We've talked about, and I signed up for the email notices, which I love.
Okay. And you got yours this past week. We kind of give out a here it comes warning notice, right?
Yep.
Yeah, good to know.
Yep. And I like anything like that that can save money and the resources of mailing things out. But are there any other initiatives that you'd like to talk about, or have we covered them all?
I think we covered most of them. I mean, we're always looking for ways to help the taxpayer. Like I mentioned before, the area that I'm most focusing now is how to help people with tax relief. And let me tell you what kind of changes we're looking at to do through the bill that Senator Davis is doing. Is we've found, so currently tax relief is based on household income. So you're going to have circumstances where the elderly person might have a grandson or a daughter that is actually living there just to help take care of that elderly person. We actually had an individual that came to us and said, hey, my neighbor can afford to have a nurse come in twice a week or 3 times a week to help him. I can't afford that, so I have to have my daughter live with me. Under the current laws, it requires that we include that daughter's income in the calculation. And then that could limit or reduce the amount of tax relief that a person would get. Another example is if somebody's disabled and they're getting disability from Social Security, or you have a younger person who's under 18, but they work at Arby's, you have to include things like that. So that's one of the areas that I really want to focus on, continue to focus on in the future. And the other areas is how do we find all those who deserve tax relief and currently aren't taking advantage of that. So those are kind of the areas I really like to focus on. We're always involved. We always try to pay attention to what's going on in the legislature to make sure they realize changes that they might make, how it'll affect the individual property tax owner and things like that. So we think we've done a lot of things that have helped the county. We're always interested in doing more. On the investment side, this is the investment side has been ever changing based on what's happened with interest rates. When we came on board in 2011, the interest rates were super low, so much so that it actually was advantageous for us to keep money at the bank instead of investing it, because we could get a higher earnings credit from the bank than we could if we invested it. Then that changed where the interest rates were going up and up and up, but now they're heading back down again. So there's areas that we need to pay particular attention to, because we want to obviously get the most return we can with a safe investment.
Thank you. I appreciate your focus on that legislation. I live here in the Glendale neighborhood of Salt Lake, and we have many, many families that are intergenerational. And I imagine that if it were, grandma and grandpa applying for tax relief, that they likely would qualify, but because maybe they have a larger family, they won't. So I appreciate that focus. And the last two questions, the first question that I'd like to ask, and these are the last two questions, but the first one is, a lot of people say that hiring is policy, that the people you have around you are in and of it themselves are a form of public policy. So what have you done, or what initiatives have you worked on to make your office more inclusive and diverse, representing Salt Lake Salt Lake County's population?
That is a great question. What we focused on when we got here, and we realized that there was an issue there, was we needed to provide cross training, number one, and also succession planning. We've had a lot of people that were in the treasurer's office have been there many, many, many years, and they had specific duties that when they left, we would have a little bit of some learning or training that we needed to have done before they left. And number two, we actually had and I won't say this person specifically, but we actually had somebody that we were quite excited about as far as her abilities. And she was not happy in the division that she was in, and was going to basically leave the county or leave our office. And we actually, looking at what was going to happen in the future, knowing that with retirements or whatever that circumstance might change, we kept her in the office, gave her other duties, so that when the circumstance came, which happened earlier this year, we could bring her back in. And she's been a significant help and to our team. So what we've tried to do is we realize that through succession planning and cross training, we can find a fit for those that we know will be a benefit to our office. And we've done that.
Thank you. I have just a little bit of a follow-up question on that. What types of language access are you able to provide? Do notices go out in English and Spanish? What does that look like in your office?
Yeah, so those are the main two. We also have another number of people in our office that speak Spanish, because we have a lot of people that will, especially those that come in to pay taxes. As you know, there is a certain population that do not have bank accounts, and so they deal with cash. And so we do have that in our office. We make sure we have that in our office available to those who come in. With the tax relief program, we made sure we had people available for that. If anybody calls on the phone, we can direct them to somebody who will speak Spanish. As far as the other languages, there are, as you know, a big refugee population that's moved into the valley, and we do not currently have that area of expertise in our office. No.
Well,
But yeah, we are aware that there are many that don't speak English anymore. So.
Well, and it's an area that many organizations, especially with COVID and going digital, have had to adjust to. Certainly, even our organization, focusing on language access is something that's important.
Yeah,
so.
In fact, when we sent out our press release on tax relief, we were actually reminded, hey, we need to get this out in Spanish also, which we were able to do through people in our office. So yeah, that's a great point.
Well, thank you. So I don't see any more questions from the public here. So I'm going to ask you my last question, which is there any question I should have asked you that I haven't asked you?
I can't think of one right now. I think one of you might add, I guess the question that I would have asked is, why is the treasurer's office even a political office? Why is it not similar to cities where you don't have a Republican name or a Democrat name? And again, there are a number of counties, very few counties, but there are some that don't do that. The benefit of not having an R or D by your name is that the people would maybe focus more on the qualifications. So there's a benefit to that. But then in reality, the way the state statute or the county is set up is that you do it by party. So that's an interesting topic that people have asked me. Why, number one, is it an elected position? And I think we've covered that. And number two, why is it a partisan position? When in reality, you're looking at the person's qualifications. Because when you think about it, since we work with all the offices, elected officials, and with the council and with mayor's finance, and obviously there's people in Salt Lake County from both parties, very seldom do we even think about what party that person is from and when we're working with them, because I think we can all see that everybody's trying to do what's best for the citizens of the county. There might be some different opinions on how to do that, but we all try to work together. With the difficult time we have now with COVID, as far as how to balance the budget, how do we help people that are going to be affected by COVID as far as incomes and areas of need. So many people think that there's this big division in the county between parties, when in reality we're all working together to try to get things done.
Well, I really appreciate that perspective, and the thought had crossed my mind about why these offices are partisan, and I appreciate you diving into that. I'd like to thank you for your time today. Is there anything, last parting words that you'd like to get out before we go ahead and end the live stream?
Well, really, just obviously we emphasize people voting, and as other people have said, the county elected offices are down the ballot a little bit. In fact, I'm the last person to vote for before you go to the judges and vote yes or no, if you know that part of the ballot. So we ask people to look at the entire ballot and to actually vet the candidates, because they might not seem like the most important elected office, but as I mentioned, we can do things to help many people. So that's all we ask, is that people look and vote. That's all we can ask.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your public service. I know that it's a lot to put your neck out there and or I guess I should say stick your neck out there, but
There you go. Yeah.
we appreciate it, and I look forward to speaking with you in the future. Good luck in November.
Thank you again, Turner, for doing this. This has been a big help for many people.
Thank you. You take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.